the emergency procedures up on the screen. In the unlikely event of an earthquake or anything like that, please follow our staff. They'll lead the way out. And if I can ask you, all mobile phones are off. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go straight into our opening formalities. It's a karakia timatanga. Please join me. Whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kinge huta, kia mā taratara ki tai. I he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hei hu, ti hei Māori ora. Thank you, everybody. Okay, items of business not on the agenda which cannot be delayed. This is an item that, in terms of Standing Order 10.12, Council notes that that the matter of the Wellington Water Limited value for money was not listed on the agenda because the information was received after the agenda was distributed. And 2, agrees to discuss the matter at this meeting due to the significance in relation to local water done well consultation. Do I need moved? Okay, I'd like to move that. Do I have a seconder? Josh, thank you. Councillor Briggs. Okay, apologies. Moving on to item 2. Need to carry it. Okay, sorry. Does everybody agree with that motion? Can all those in favour please say aye? All those against please say no. I declare that motion carried. Apologies. I've received an apology from Councillor Brown. She's out of town. And I do note that Mayor Barry is attending the meeting via Zoom, and he may turn his camera off, but he's still going to be present in the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any apologies for the meeting for lateness or early departure? Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Potential early departure depending on how long the meeting goes.
Kia te pai. I'll move those apologies. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barrett seconds. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? I declare that motion carried. Moving straight through to public comment. We've got no public comment, so we're moving straight into conflicts of interest. I call on members to declare any conflicts of interest that they may have regarding items on this agenda. Are there any? It appears not. Thank you. So moving on to the items not on the agenda, Wellington Water Limited, value for money. This is on page 157 to 177 in your diligent. And I'd like to invite Joe Miller, Chief Executive, to speak to the item and explain what officers have done in response to this. Joe.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, members. It's been a long week. Just to recap, it was a week last Monday that Wellington Water issued 2 reports, one from AECOM, summary reports, one from AECOM and one from Deloitte, which you received immediately after they were released on Monday. They have been well travelled in the media, and towards the end of last week, redacted versions of the full reports were also sent through to you. The Wellington Water Committee meeting that is to take place this Friday was preceded by an extraordinary meeting of Wellington Water Committee yesterday. Councillor Edwards attended on our behalf, and I know he'll be speaking after me. And I gave you a briefing on Friday in terms of initially where we're at to. So I think the request is what have officers done? So a number of things, really. We've obviously briefed you around the background and our initial analysis in relation to the reports. And just to recap, there was a lot of talk in the media around how there was 3 times too much spent on the OPEX around leaks. And that was clarified. I'm sure Councillor Edwards will speak to this yesterday. You've seen a memo, a letter from the Chief Executive Fulton Hogan, but also a reference from the Chief Executive of Wellington Water yesterday. That is a price per kilometre, not price per job. And we all know that the state of the network as such in terms of its age is that, and you've discussed it here many times, you can kind of have that whack-a-mole of fixing a leak on a piece of pipe and then the next bit arriving 10 metres later or thereon. So that was an incorrect reporting of that. But not to say that there weren't very significant issues in the report around how the councils are getting value for money and that ratepayers are not being overcharged. Those reports aren't a surprise. Way back last year, when after Wellington had released its field force report and an immediate response, the Wellington Water Committee in its letter of expectation statement of intent set out that it required Wellington Water to truly establish value for money, a set of KPIs, various different benchmarking, and so those reports and their commissioning are very much a response to that letter of expectation and statement of intent. In terms of going through those reports, as well as briefing all of you, we are working hard with Wellington Water to really understand all of the reasons for the ops and maintenance increases. That's the OPEX type work, noting that we think that the majority of that is age and condition of the network. And that was reaffirmed really in the meeting yesterday. That doesn't mean that we won't carry on doing that work to get that assurance. It's important that we have it. Our main concern is with pipe renewals that have gone through the contractor panel, and this is the area, as we've briefed you, that seems to be the area where there is significant, whether there's overcharging or over specification or over design. That's the bit we really need to understand. And whilst Wellington Water have explained and issued new guidelines about how they're awarding work, how they're working through those panels, given that over the last 3 years you have significantly stepped up renewals, which is the right thing to do, because ultimately if you don't renew the pipes, the leaks keep going on and just getting worse and worse, and you all know that all you're doing with a leak is sticking a patch on top of an already bust system. But over the last 3 years, you have significantly upped your investment so that we have completed 40 kilometres of pipe renewals as we've started to address that backlog over a number of decades. So what we're currently doing is working with Wellington Water to understand the cost of that work to date, to understand its possible impact. We're also working with them in terms of existing contracts that are about to be let under that, to look at what needs to be competitively tendered and how we get the tension, the competitive tension, the commercial arrangements into our system. And there were, we don't yet have all the answers. I believe there will be some further answers at the Wellington Water Committee on Friday. And you, in our briefing last week, indicated some of the questions you wanted to ask, and they were put to Wellington Water to seek those assurances for the future. And the other important thing for us to do is to make sure, both through the Wellington Water Committee and ourselves, to ensure that there is proper follow-up on all of the recommendations of the ACOM and the Deloitte reports, and indeed the peer review report by RBL. A number of things that are just anticipating the next paper. People might say, what does this mean for rates? Does this mean that rates might go down next year? I know that's a question and a number of people have asked. And the answer to that is no. You'll recall that we didn't put in as much renewals as we wanted to because you were balancing the amount people could afford to pay versus the amount we needed to renew. So the answer is to get more bang for our buck, more renewals done, rather than pausing on the renewals, albeit that in relation to a couple of contracts that are currently in progress, we will get the assurances that we all need, that you need as governors, to give to ratepayers before they proceed. So all of that will continue to be, this isn't the only time we'll be discussing this, that will continue to be reported through to your long-term plan, annual plan subcommittee. The Chief Executive of Wellington Water yesterday highlighted that he had immediately found $5 million worth of savings. That's not our $5 million, that's $5 million across the operations of the panels. And again, they will plough that back into more bang for buck, doing more for what is currently the money. Just to remind you on that, we've also covered things like some new capacity tools, and indeed further costs, without putting that call on ratepayers, expecting that will be covered through some of the efficiencies that we know we can expect to find as this value for money work goes through over the next 15 months before getting to a new entity. Finally, from me, and I know, Madam Chair, there might be questions at some point, and Councillor Edwards will come in. People will ask in relation to the next paper, what does it mean if we have costs that are too high now, and what we've put in the local water done well paper and the consultation document? We have anticipated on both models, because they're all models at this point. It is literally something that's there to compare apples with apples. What you actually get in terms of a programme is what funders can fund, what a market can cope with in terms of a programme, and what capacity there is in the sector to deliver the work. But that consultation document already anticipates a 15% efficiency that has been modelled in on today's prices to enable that to happen. So what does that mean? It means that the model at the moment is showing what we believe to be a worst case scenario. The efficiencies from value for money have been baked in, but I would still say, and we'll get onto that when we get to that item, that is only a model. We have to have something to compare like with like for now, but there's clearly a lot more work to do before you will get to your local water services delivery plan for the future in July, around June, July of this year. I'll pause there, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Jo. It's a lot to take in, especially if you weren't over it and at the meeting the other day. Councillor Edwards, would you like to comment or?
Yeah, very briefly, just hopefully building on what Jo said. I won't say a hell of a lot more, but I do, as Jo said, it's very unfortunate that we've had this, let's call it a misunderstanding about the price per kilometre and the price per job, because I think there's an impression out there now that everything Wellington Water has done has been 3 times more than it should have cost, and it's going to be very hard to claw that impression back. And although the media yesterday reporting on the Wellington Committee Water Committee meeting Monday have noted in some of their reports, have tried to clarify. They haven't done that in a big way. I noticed it way down the bottom of the stories kind of thing. So there are a lot of people with an unfortunate impression. And while Mayor Barry has been stranded by Cyclone Alfred, he did give me a very good run sheet of potential questions to ask and so on, which made my job very easy. And he did have questions around, in particular, Hutt City wanting to know what the impact of what's gone on is on our capital project. Is it all capital projects? What's the impact for OPEX? Or was it just the projects tendered through the consultant and contractor panels? We want to know that if we have been overcharged, the reasons for that and how those responsible might make amends to lower Hutt ratepayers if evidence of overcharging is found. And so I put that to the meeting, and Mr. Doherty, Ros Connolly from Greater Wellington had a similar question. And he said to us that he would come round to all 6 shareholding councils if he was asked to, and delve into those sorts of issues. But he gave a fairly blunt warning that if those councils expect him to delve back into history and give an accounting of each job and how much it might have been overcharged, well, he said he couldn't do it. He doesn't have the staff. It would take months. And quite frankly, he's got other priorities on his plate. But he has guaranteed to come out to visit our council if we ask him and give some further explanations. We did ask the question, one of the proactive measures that they're taking was a reset of the consultant and contractor panel arrangements, sort of what the hell does that mean kind of thing. We keep in those things. And Mr. Doherty said, you can't go out to open tender with every bit of work that's in front of Wellington Water. Again, he doesn't have the staff to do that, and the delays that would cause would be counterproductive. But they are going out a lot more and testing the market to get a fair price. And certainly the bigger jobs will be going out to competitive tender and so on. The only other thing that happened to the meeting, you probably all caught up with it, was there was a ringing endorsement for Nick Leggett from Mr Doherty saying it would be a disaster if, the committee bowed to some pressure there for him to resign, given how we want to make progress to the reforms that are ahead of us. He called him a shining light. I think we've all read that. I found him very convincing on that personally.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I'll now open up. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Mitchell.
I've got a couple of questions and I'm not sure whether to expect answers at this meeting, but I'll go ahead and ask them anyway. My first one is to do with this infamous graph of unplanned maintenance cost per kilometre. And as has been noted, it's incorrect to take from that our jobs are 3 times more than other councils. There was a kind of correction issued and it talked about, well, I think the using the term cost per kilometre was maybe not the right word for it. It's really spend per kilometre. And there was a correction that came out that started to explain that our pipes are in such bad condition, that's why it's gone up. But the other thing that as soon as I saw this graph and the dates on it, and it still doesn't really seem to have been talked about, is that what changed at around 2019 was this council and other councils in the region commitment to confront the problem. We could quite easily have in 2019 continued to kind of flatline our spending on this stuff and that graph would be a flat line. Part of the reason it's gone up surely is because we committed to spending more money, to fixing more leaks, and we've done it again and again over the recent years. I haven't seen any acknowledgement that that is contributing to the upswing in this graph, which is spending per kilometre, is actually the decision to spend more money on this stuff. So I just wondered if you had any comment on that, Joe or Bruce, or I can wait and ask the Chief Executive when he comes through, but it just seems to me weird that it doesn't seem to have been mentioned anywhere that I've seen.
I think that's very valid, Councillor Mitchell, and what I suggest we do is collect all of the questions up and give proper responses on them. I'm sure that's a factor. One thing this council hasn't done since you've made your investment decisions, you don't turn the money tap off when you say, well, that's how much is in leaks and that's it, and we've spent it. You've been really clear with our community that actually if there are leaks there, we have to fix it. Otherwise, all this treated water is being wasted and then your bulk water costs go up. So I'll make sure we take that away and you get a thorough response.
Thank you. And the other thing I'd like to hear about, and I heard this message, I listened into the meeting yesterday and heard that message that we could spend untold amount more money doing forensic analysis of everything that's happened in the past, and that's not worth going down that track. However, I would be interested to see if we or they can kind of a bit more bluntly help us understand what our exposure to overcharging may have been in terms of, you mentioned, for example, the pipe laying being one part of that, and we've been laying more pipes than anyone else in the region. So, and then there are other big capital projects that haven't been part of this contractor panel at all. So in terms of our kind of overall spending on water, which bits are exposed and which bits aren't, and kind of what kind of quantum we're talking about in terms of just not everything's 3 times as much as we should have been paying for it.
And we'll make sure we come back to you on that. And we know, for example, at the moment, your biggest investment is in the Seaview treatment plant. All of that is including the sludge dryer renewal. All of that is subject to competitive tender on its own. Mangaraki Reservoir, there's been an urgent structural repair there. We need to understand just what that's happened to. Petone Collecting Sewer, that's also subject to its own tender. And you're right that the issues we really want to understand are particularly the water main renewals and some of the wastewater main trunk upgrade in Wainuiomata North. So we believe that we should, without having to do forensic analysis, get more of a clue, almost what are we not talking about? So to put that to one side so that we can really then focus on what we are talking about. and what the quantum of that might be.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Stellinger.
Thank you. Just keen to talk a little bit more about the OPEX. I took some comfort from the early comments from the Chief Executive that this would still be an area that was looked into to see if there was an issue there. And Councillor Mitchell made some valid points that we increased our spend, and hence that graph, if it was just for us, I know it's the whole region, would be showing an increase. I don't want to discount that as an area we need to get some more information on, because while we increased the spend, we didn't increase actually the number of jobs. During the last few years, we only repaired as many leaks as we did in 2017-18. So those leaks are costing us a lot more per job. There may be good reasons for that, but I think we can't dismiss the graph. We can dismiss the commentary that's been on it because that was wrong, but I still think it's an area we need to look into. So I hope that will continue to be the case as was indicated. I do have a question unrelated, if I can carry on while I've got the microphone, Madam Chair. I'm interested as well whether there will be a report to either council or a relevant committee on what our own council could have done differently to perhaps spot what had gone on earlier. We have had some private discussions, which I think have been helpful towards that end, but I think it would be useful to have a formal response on that, what perhaps we could have done differently earlier on before this all coming to light, and what things we are progressing differently now, which are going to make a difference. And I know we are already progressing something differently. So I think overall it will be a positive story of response by us and by Wellington Water, but I'm just keen to ask the question whether we will be getting a report on that formally.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm happy. I mean, first things, yes, in relation to your point around the OPEX, it's still important that we interrogate it. I suspect that the issue is far more in that consultant contractor panel around the renewals, but that's not a reason to disregard the first. And you will want a full report, including what the council could and should have done differently. For my own part, and I'm happy to say this publicly, you know, whenever spending of public money is a really important thing, and it's important that we all make sure that we get the best value for our buck out of that. And I've obviously reflected, whilst the arrangements at Wellington Water have been there for some time, and it's been clear to me pretty much from the start that the model we had was not fit for purpose, and we really needed to embrace water reform. You know, if I reflect on the increase we've put into, you have chosen to put into, rightly, capital and maintenance to begin to address that backlog investment in the system. What I have done is carry on with the level of client-side investment, oversight, if you like, in terms of resource that I inherited. I haven't changed that. Doesn't mean to say we haven't changed our practices. The Chief Finance Officer, myself, and Strategic Advisor regularly meet with Wellington Water, but I haven't come to you and asked for extra resource to increase that oversight, and that's something I've been reflecting on. It's not the only thing, but yes, I'm sure we'll all come back with that and think about, you know, from setup to now what we could have done about making sure there was more competitive tension in those things in the first place, and I know on what we could have done since then, and I know the Chair of Audit and Risk will be keen to see that too.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With your indulgence, I'd like to ask a question of Councillor Edwards. I wasn't going to raise this in this, but because you made the statement was made about Nick Leggett, I have been asked to ask, was there any talk at the time of a potential conflict of interest of Nick Leggett being Chair of Wellington Water and Infrastructure New Zealand?
Yeah, there's a very long discussion about that, and quite a long explanation from Mr. Leggett and from Mr. Doherty about how that had been handled. I wouldn't like to give a summary of that, but it's on Council's YouTube page. Yeah, but it was spoken for at least 5 or 10 minutes at length.
Thank you. And as pointed out, the video is up on Council's YouTube page, so if anyone wants to watch it, I would advise that. Thank you. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, I do have one more question I just remembered, and again, probably don't expect an answer today. And I was trying to remember if I was cutting across papers in this agenda, but actually I think it was some information that had been emailed to councillors earlier, which was about our ability to benchmark ourselves against other councils, and how we had asked Audit NZ for information, which they hold, and they wouldn't really share it with us, and somebody else was asked as well and wouldn't really share it with us. But my question is, looking forward, the Labour Party's Three Waters proposal, and it's been carried into Local Water Done Well for financial regulation of the sector, really. What degree of kind of confidence can we have that under that new financial regulation scheme, someone will be looking at this kind of stuff across the country and noticing that particular regions are really expensive compared to others?
So there's been a absolute dearth of benchmarking information available to get down to some of the true cost. There is a Water New Zealand performance framework, which is, I think, what you're referring to, but it wouldn't have helped us necessarily with all of this. The Local Water Done Well proposals, which we're discussing in just a moment, anticipate that no matter what type of entity you have, then those entities will be regulated by both Te Mata Arawai, for the quality of the water, and by the Commerce Commission in relation to economic regulation, so including value for money, price, and indeed value for money for the consumer. So consumers of water will look immediately to the provider and to those two regulators of both quality and cost, which we will also be able to see.
And have they indicated that they will be comparing costs between water providers, or just kind of looking at one and going, everything looks kind of okay?
I expect there to be a full and open benchmarking, an open data regime, Taitura, of which I am the president, submitted to the minister and to the regulators what we thought should be involved in there in terms of that regulation, and that's precisely the line that's gone down. We await their draft proposals.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any more questions? No? Okay, I've got some recommendations. No? Yeah, Bruce, did you want to add anything?
The only thing that I would add is that one of the variables that we'll be looking at in terms of the OPEX is the amount of time per job that is taken, because when you look at the information in the ACOM report, they're saying that labour costs, etc., are pretty much on par or a bit lower than what would be expected. So the other variable that we're not sure about is the time that it takes to do that. And so that's one aspect that we want to delve into and find out whether there's differences in the Wellington region as opposed to other areas. Now, whether we can find that information or not and compare it, I don't know, but we'll certainly have a look at that and compare it maybe to whatever else we can find. The other thing to say is that it is the consultant panel area that we're concerned about, and the renewals of water and wastewater pipe. And so we've asked Wellington Water to provide us with some information in respect of a number of contracts that have recently been completed in the last 12 months. So we will get some information on 7 contracts that we've specifically asked. And the initial feedback is that on a per kilometre basis, they will vary quite a bit, because there are so many variables in terms of where the work was done, the size of the pipe, the number of connections, whether it was in a busy road or on the berm, all of those, the methodology, so you can expect quite a bit of variation in those numbers.
Thank you. I've got a question, another one from Chris Parkin. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Bruce. Through you, Chair. Following up on that question around timeframe, in one of the reports, they also mentioned that we're looking at a 10% rework rate. I can't recall whether or not that was benchmarked across the country in terms of, is that a similar rework rate to other locations?
That is something that we'll look at. I think also in that area, they said that the data was not particularly reliable, so take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, one of the issues we have in this area with rework rates is it the same job, or is it in fact, 6 inches down the line? Where it's basically, the AC pipe has just burst again.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we put questions at our briefing last Friday, and these have been summarised, so I'm going to put them into the recommendation now. Get the officers to bring that up on the screen to have a look. Okay, so everyone like to have a read of those, please. Yeah. Okay, so this recommendation is that Council, 1, notes that the current Wellington Water model for water infrastructure, with contractual arrangements going as far back as 2016, is not fit for purpose. Number 2, reaffirms Hutt City Council's commitment to progressing regional reform at speed whilst making improvements to the current model. Number 3, notes that recent reports into value for money at Wellington Water Limited. And 4, seeks further information from Wellington Water Limited on the extent of the impact on Hutt City Council projects, and invites the Chief Executive and Board Chair to attend future council meetings. 5, seeks further information from Wellington Water Limited on the extent to which, if any, council has been overcharged by contractors. 6, seeks assurance via reporting to Wellington Water Committee that the recommendations outlined in the reports are being implemented. And 7, notes that the shareholder councils must also play their part in improving systems and processes at pace, including traffic management to streamline activity and reduce costs. I'm going to move those recommendations. Councillor Edwards, seconding. Thank you. Yeah, is there any debate? Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to ask, and I'm sure this will happen, I think it's important that our residents are aware, considering comments made by politicians today, that we are in support of transitioning into the new entity. I think there's a lot of misinformation going around. Any answers from you or the floor, Madam Chair?
Your recommendation refers to moving at pace. It's been moved and seconded.
Thank you.
I've got Mayor Campbell Barry.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Will you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, great. I suppose I just wanted to say, first off, thank you to yourself, to Councillor Edwards, and also I've passed my thanks to Councillor Ros Connolly for chairing yesterday's meeting. I think the key thing here is that we do take a little bit of time to now really process and understand what these reports mean for each individual council. As I think we say in these recommendations, we will be inviting Wellington Water to come in and speak to us directly on what that means, and already from what both the Chief Executive and Bruce Hodgins have shared. There is work being done to understand the extent of it. Agree that we do need to look across the board, albeit there seems to be some clear red flags with the panel set up, and obviously us as the council who's invested the most in renewing pipes, and something we're quite rightly proud of in the region. We need to make sure and give confidence to our communities that we haven't been overcharged, and if there are any issues, that we have a plan of attack in response to that as well. So I think that also, finally, sorry, I should say, I just want to thank everyone for their approach with this. There has been varying approaches from different shareholding councils, and I think that us, again, taking our time, processing the information, and looking at the bigger picture of wider reform, which we'll move to very shortly, is so crucial in all of this, because we do want to set ourselves up for success, and also, remind ourselves that the challenge when it comes to water infrastructure investment in our city and in our region is so huge that we need to all be working together and moving in the same direction. So just want to thank everyone for that, and obviously a lot more to come back as well.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Mitchell.
It's gone from the screen, and I don't want to focus on too much on a minor detail, but the last point that was made on there about traffic management talked about, thank you, streamlining activity and reducing costs. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about it not saying while maintaining safety, because I don't think we want to give anyone the impression that we're going to just go for the cheap option now. Safety be damned. It's all about saving money from here on in. So I'd be much happier if it said at the end while maintaining safety.
I'm sure you can add that. The explanation for why that's there, and it was already identified actually by us last year at Wellington Water, is there are 6 different ways of doing traffic management, and there must be a better way of doing that. Every individual council has its own individual plan, which means every individual contractor has to work out which council it is and what's doing. So the streamlining, to be clear, is about not having 6 different ways of doing it, whilst always recognising that safety comes first.
We can add that as well. I don't think that's going to be any difference to the recommendation, so thank you. Councillor Edwards, are you happy with that because you second it? Thank you. Okay, so we've moved and we've seconded it. We've had debate. So all those in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Okay, now moving on to number 5, Local Water Done Well, the consultation on water services delivery model. This is on page 2. And Bruce Hodgins, could you please speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report outlines the planned consultation required under the new water legislation to determine a future water services delivery model, and it seeks your endorsement of the consultation document. And it follows on from a decision that you made in October last year that we would consult on 2 options, a modified status quo and the new regional asset owning entity. Based on the financial modelling, Council's preferred option delivers the best results and would mean that water charges will not be as great as if we continue with a modified Wellington Water model. Noting, however, that under both scenarios that costs will increase. Different investment scenarios have been modelled with similar results. That is, the asset owning model will deliver the better result. So, as Joe was alluding to earlier, regardless of what that amount of investment is in the region, the same sort of result comes out through the modelling that has been done. So happy to answer any questions or take any comments on the CD.
Councillor Mitchell has a question.
Actually, I have probably half a dozen comments, but I'll just seek leave from the chair to email those through after the meeting. I will just ask one question then, Bruce, which is at the bottom of, it's page 28 of the agenda paper, and it's the survey questions. And right at the bottom of it, it says Greater Wellington also wants to hear directly from the region's residents and directs people who have just completed our questionnaire to Greater Wellington's website. Are they asking a whole set of different questions, or is someone going to go there and find this exact same questions that are regionally consistent?
So the consultation document has been worked on together by the councils, so we're trying to align what the questions are. The metropolitan councils undertook that we would direct people to Greater Wellington so that they fully understand and appreciate that Greater Wellington are part of this in terms of the bulk water supply. So I'm not certain exactly what their final questionnaire will look like, but it will be modelled pretty similar to what we've got.
Yeah, I just feel like it's quite strange for us to ask a set of regionally developed questions and then direct them to Greater Wellington, unless Greater Wellington's asking a whole bunch of different additional questions. If they're asking the same or similar questions, we're really asking people to fill out the same survey twice.
We can take that away, Bruce, I mean, the answer is if we're asking the same questions, they have our data. And if there aren't questions that aren't their data, then we'd explain what it is. We can take that away. And that will be the same across the 4 TAs. You are the first people to be considering this, so I imagine other elected members will be coming up with that elsewhere.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Anything else from the floor? Councillor Stallinger.
It's just a few, hopefully quick ones, if I may. First of all, on page 12, I just wonder whether it would be good to include a couple of sentences after the comment on Wellington Water value for money reports. Really just stating what people who've been reading the media will have in mind anyway, that some significant issues were identified and that actions are underway to address them. So it's just a suggestion there. Then on page 14 and page 16, there's reference to benefits from economies of scale, but my understanding is the organisation in terms of its scale isn't really much bigger than Wellington Water at the moment. It will have a greater scope, owning the assets and so on, but if we are stating that the savings are coming through economies of scale, I'm not sure how realistic that is. I know there will be plenty of savings through other efficiencies that can be gained. So I'm not 100% confident that that's entirely fair what's said there. Officers may have a different view. And then finally, while I've got the mic, the bit I found a little bit, that could be a little bit confusing for those reading through, they might not so much confusing, they might get a false impression, was through on page 19, where we have a graph that shows our rates revenue impact, no doubt entirely correctly, and it shows, with the option of a multi-council owned water organisation, the rates will be significantly lower. So a reader will think, yep, I want to tick that option. And then a bit further on, when we talk about water charges, we show a graph that shows water charges also being lower if we take that option. So it looks like it's a massive win to go ahead with it, where in actual fact, there will be some differences, but not to the magnitude that a reader may get from looking at those graphs. So I wondered whether on the rates revenue impact, there probably should also be a bar on the option there for the water owning entity, is just adding in what the water bills are likely to be, so that you're comparing apples with apples. Your total bills as they are now. I know it's termed in terms of, shown in terms of our revenue, but somewhere in there, I think there should be a graph which shows what you're paying now, what you'd be paying under the alternative options.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can invite Jenny to comment. I agree with you that it's not the most entirely sensible way to present information, but it is what the guidance requires us to do. One set of documents about what the impact on local rates is, and another bit about water charges, which is why the document says up front is that no matter what happens, I think this is the important thing that we shouldn't, is that water is going to cost more money. It's not going to cost less money under either option. And I think that's something that you and we have consistently said is a problem around reform, that people haven't really fronted up at a national level to identifying that water is simply going to cost more. We'll look at the detail of it, but we are the Act, as I recall it, says you must have a section setting out impact on rates. But of course, it's like debt, isn't it? You're not paying the rates, but you're paying the water charges. The impact on our debt is reduced, but that debt is going somewhere. It's going to NewCo, and it has to be paid back. However, we are required to compartmentalise it, and that has been through a legal review with Simpson Grierson. Jenny, I don't know if I've called that exactly right.
Yes, you have, Joe, that's absolutely spot on. I'm also just thinking that, there is a lot of words that try and explain that piece in the consultation document about the future water charges and so on. And it could be when we are working through the design of this document that we may be trying to, for example, show rates bill with the water charges taken off, trying to use some design elements to help people's understanding as well. And we can take that away and have a think about it.
Thank you, Councillor Stallinger. Councillor Parkin?
Kia ora. So follow up on that. I understand that legislation means that we have to include those two parts separately. My question is, can we then also include a third section which combines them, which would actually provide clarity to the reader?
I'm going to suggest we stick with the design elements, Councillor Parkin. This is the content that's been done regionally. And you can all imagine what drafting by committee is. There might be, I think there is a suggestion here in delegation that there will be some final tidying up. But I think that's probably where we've got to after this many iterations of it.
Councillor Mitchell, does this apply?
It may well apply, and I guess it depends on what we are required to show in terms of rates revenue impact or rates impact, because I think one of the kind of key things that makes it hard for people to look at what it means to them is that the second graph is indicative average water charge per connection. That's me, that's how much I'm going to pay. But the rates one is rates revenue impact on the council and how many millions of dollars are coming and going. Not, I can't see anywhere what it's going to mean to me as a ratepayer. So if this is what we're required to have, this is what we're required to have. Otherwise, my preference would be to see the impact per connection, the same as for the other one.
It's absolutely required that the rates impact is on the council, which is a little bit bizarre when you're talking about the customer. However, this is all content in words, and I think in tabular form and pictorially, we can make it as clear to ratepayers as we can. Share your frustration.
Yes, I did hear that. So we have, we've moved this? No, we haven't. It's questions. So I'm going to move the motion. That was, yeah, and Councillor Brigg is going to second it. Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Stallinger.
Not really wanting to belabor the point, but just want to state that I think if we cannot really show clearly what the impact is for each person in this document, it won't be an effective form of consultation, and the results we get won't be that useful.
Thank you. Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in relation to the proposed section 40, subsection 2, around the relationship with mana whenua, but in particular the skill set required for directors or governance in terms of having an understanding of te mano te wai outcomes. I think that I support that recommendation, and the skill set of kawa and tikanga as the kaitiaki of our manawa te wai. So I support that provision and recognition of the relationship we have with mana whenua. Kia ora.
Kia ora, councillor. As the recommendations state in number 8, we will consider any further feedback and direction provided to the officers. So thank you for everybody's input, and we can take that away and consider it. So if that was moved and seconded, all those in favour, please say aye. All those against? I declare the motion carried. And welcome, Councillor Brown. I see you on screen. Nice to have you here. Number 6, we're moving on to retrospective endorsement of Wellington Water's joint submission on the Local Government Water Services Bill. This is on page 8 of your agenda. Again, Bruce, can you take it away?
Nothing further to add, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions of this? No? I'm looking around the room, nothing. So I'll move the motion that Council endorses its contribution to the joint submission from Wellington Councils and iwi mana whenua partners on the Local Government Water Services Bill as attached to this report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Briggs. Is there any debate? No. I'll put the motion, which has now been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yeah. All those against? No. I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that goes water. We're now moving on to proposed private district plan change 5812 Shaftesbury Grove, Stokes Valley, rezoning to medium density residential activity, page 73 of the supplementary agenda. Nathan Garrett, could you please join us? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this paper is just presenting the recommendation from the hearing panel on proposed private district plan change 58, which relates to the Shaftesbury Grove development site. The recommendation is that the plan change be granted, subject to some amended conditions, and the recommendation is appended to the report. I'm happy to take the paper as read.
Thank you, Nathan. Any members got any questions? Councillor, what's your name again? Parker, thank you.
Kia ora, Mayor Mahers. Kia ora, thank you for the report. Just regarding the plan change and the impact, I'm just looking at the map on page 87. It's indicated that there is an access way, and this is one of the potential access ways out of Stokes Valley. With the plan change, what impact will that plan change have on the potential redevelopment of that as a secondary access way at some point in the future?
The plan change itself wouldn't necessarily impact that, but I suppose what the plan change does is it enables the owners of the site to undertake a subdivision or apply for a subdivision consent. Assuming that subdivision consent would be able to be granted, there is the potential for the layout of that subdivision to, I guess, impact the ability of that area to be used for other purposes, like a second way in and out of Stokes Valley.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Firstly, the paper notes that had this property stayed in our proposed district plan, it would have ended up as a large lot residential zone, but instead it's ended up as a medium density residential zone. Does that set any kind of precedent for other properties that have been designated large lot residential zone in our draft district plan to kind of point to or challenge their designation?
If someone has a piece of land that through the proposed district plan is identified as a large lot residential zone, then they are able to contest that, I suppose, through the submission process. So the mechanism for them to do that would be to make a submission and provide the evidence through their submission that another zone would be more appropriate. And I think it's likely that submissions will be received for some sites. The next mechanism for that would be after the proposed district plan has gone through its full process and becomes the new operative district plan. Then that person would be able to apply for a private plan change in the similar way to what the landowner of the site has.
Thank you. And there was a lot of talk in the paper and various submissions about slopes and slips. And the decision has kind of ended it up in a different zone, but I assume that our natural hazard slope overlays apply equally to this property now as if it hadn't gone through this process.
The slope hazard, the slope assessment overlay that Council has recently put in its proposed district plan, at the moment, I suppose, doesn't have any legal effect to any sites because it is just a proposed district plan. So if this plan change goes through, then they would be able to develop the site without having had, well, they would have to have regard to the slope assessment overlay of the proposed district plan, but the rules around restricting development in those areas wouldn't apply yet. That requires the proposed district plan to go through its full process. However, this plan change would put some assessment requirements around any future subdivision of that site to make sure that those geohazards, as is the term they use, are taken into account through the subdivision process.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thanks, Liz. There's a comment there about a need to address the wider water supply issues facing the greater area or the area around the development. My question is, wouldn't any potential costs for that, for required water services be borne by the developer? It does say that council has some responsibility, and I note that we've got no funding for a solution to this issue in the LTP. So how do we address that?
I guess that is a decision for the council that is outside of the plan change. You'll see that the hearing panel has made the recommendation that that there's some sort of collaboration between the developer, council, and Wellington Water on how to resolve that issue. Where the costs lie with whatever solution is found, I suppose there's a decision that needs to be made as part of that work. Without any of those discussions being had, and without being an expert myself in that area, I wouldn't be able to say what proportion sits with council and what proportion would sit with the developers.
Thank you. And Councillor Brady-Dyer.
Thanks. I was going to talk to this during comment, but it's one of the main points I was going to raise around that recommendation 6. Obviously, as it's noted in the paper, I was one of the commissioners on the plan change. That there is a significant water supply issue affecting the site, and when the property was sold to the current owner by the council, they gave them a pretty strong undertaking that they would look into the water issues, and they provided evidence during the hearing of literally like the newspaper advert selling the land with the kind of understanding, hey, we'll take care of the water services. Obviously, this was a long time ago, so things have changed a lot. So there was no promise that the council would deliver water to the site, but there was a pretty strong undertaking that we'd work together. Obviously, all of that is outside of the plan change realms within the RMA, so that's why there's the extra recommendation from the panel to the council. Hey, this was raised in the hearing, we can't consider it, but hey, council, you should look into it. And yeah, it was kind of under the understanding that Wellington Water, the council, and the developer would all play their part in that conversation because the water reservoirs would have to be located on the site. There's no other spot for them, but there's also existing water supply issues to broader Stokes Valley in that area, as well as the issues on the current site, which would limit development in the future. So this is just to kind of kickstart that process for us to tell officers, hey, go out and investigate this and talk with the developer, because it's not something the panel could recommend. I hope I made that clear.
Thank you, councillor. If there's no more questions, no. You've summarised that really well. This is the start of the process. So I'm going to move the motion, and that, do we need that up, or has everyone got it? So that council receives the report and recommendations of the hearing panel attached or dated, 16th of December 24 for the proposed private plan change 58, and notes that the process under the Resource Management Act for 1991 for the plan change 58 adopts the recommended decisions on the private plan change 58 and the reasons for those decisions set out in the hearing panel's report. Approves the proposed district plan change 58 subject to the amendments recommended by the hearing panel as recommended in section 8 of the hearing panel's report, and resolves to publicly notify its decision on the proposed district plan change 58 within 10 working days of this decision, and to serve that decision on the applicant and the submitters. And the last one is 6, instructs staff to work with Wellington Water and the requester of the private plan change to identify and implement a solution that will unlock the development potential of the site as well as address the wider water issues facing the area. I'll move it. It's Councillor Edwards seconding. Thank you. Is there any debate? Councillor Dyer.
Kia ora, I just wanted to acknowledge the other two panel members that sat on this plan change hearing with me. We obviously found that rezone the area matched and aligned with our own council's urban growth strategy. The one hand balancing the need for more residential areas, but also the environmental effects. So you'll see that whole list there in paragraph 8 of the additional measures that we've requested. Did want to note, there's some commentary within the 100 and something pages of our report that one of the trickiest things we dealt with on this decision was the council's decision to not proceed with SNAs on the site. With the way the legislation is worded, left the panel in a really tricky position as to how it was interpreted, because the wording is very strict that if council has chosen not to look into SNAs, which obviously we made a direct decision to do that, then XYZ applies, and that put us in a pretty tricky position just with the SNA stuff that we've decided to pause. So yeah, it was quite a long, robust period, but with the expertise of Rob Schofield and Liz Burge, I think we've come to a really good place. So thank you to those two members.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Dyer for his involvement in this. The knowledge he's building in the district plan area, there's very complicated matters, is an asset to this city. And I think this decision balances well that those twin aims of having more housing in the city, but looking after our environment and all those other concerns. And I think this is a very thorough and well-considered series of recommendations, and I congratulate Brady and the other two members of the hearings panel.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Kia ora. Yeah, when I was reading this, obviously, I have an affiliation with Taita College and the work that's going on there. So this was quite important to me, particularly around that environmental space where the wetlands are absolutely being developed, and the bird life and the life force that's now coming back after COVID is incredible. But I do know that this has had an environmental lens very clearly over this piece of work. So thank you, to the team doing this and having that advice. And I know that we've got to be thinking around that water space. And I know that that's absolutely not going to go away in a hurry. We have to make sure that that's right in order for what may happen next. So I just wanted to highlight that I hope that moving forward that we are really drilling down to ensure that that water piece is executed to the best way possible for that area and Stokes Valley generally as well. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stellinger.
Yes, I'm very pleased to have seen this come before us as well. And I think it's a great decision to have zoned it in this way. Trying to delve back in my distant past memory, I kind of loosely remember some of the discussions that went on around the time council was looking to sell the property. And one of the difficulty was the cost of solving the water issue versus the possible return, and that was linked to a number of number of sites that could be developed and so on. So I think this scenario with greater density now being available should help that formula, I suppose, when it comes to working out a solution that's going to work for all parties. I assume that council's contribution may be possible to recoup through development contributions, at least a portion of it, so it doesn't fall on the general ratepayers. So, yeah, very, very positive.
Thank you. And my final comment is I too was pleased to see this go through with the lens over it with the environment, for the environment, and the fact that it has been in council for so long, this particular piece of land. So to have it developed and, well, to start the process is fantastic. So well done, the Hearings Committee. I'm going to move this motion. We've got a seconder. Yes, we have. I'm now going to put the motion, which has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? There's no. I now declare it carried. Thank you. Okay, moving swiftly through. We're number 8, recommendations to Council from Policy Finance Strategy Committee. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendations from today's meeting of the Policy, Finance and Strategy Committee.
Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dyer. Any debate? No debate. I'll put the motion that's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, no. I declare the motion carried. Questions? I've received no questions. I'm now going to move to 10, which is exclusion of the public. And I move the motion that the public be excluded from the following parts of this proceedings, the meeting, namely Te Wai Takamori o Te Awa Kairangi commercial matters. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Tupou. Okay. So thank you. And Will Peach, you'll be staying in the public, excluded part of the meeting. Thank you. And everyone else is gone. And we will, yeah. The live stream will go down, but I need a seconder, please. I've got Councillor Tupou and no debate. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. I declare that